I didn't fall apart. I didn't scream. I just picked up my coat off the floor where my mother had thrown it, and I walked out the front door of the house I grew up in without looking back. That was the last time I stood in that hallway for 18 years. I was 22. It was February in Ottawa, which anyone who's lived there knows is not a month that forgives you for being unprepared. The kind of cold that gets into your collar and doesn't leave. I had $60 in my wallet, a bag I'd packed in about 4 minutes, and nowhere to go. My boyfriend, the man who'd told me he loved me, who'd been sitting at our dinner table the week before laughing at my father's jokes, had already stopped answering my calls 2 days earlier, the moment I told him I was pregnant. I didn't know yet what I was going to do about the pregnancy. I hadn't had time to think. My parents found out before I'd even decided anything, and that was enough for them. My mother's exact words were, "You've embarrassed this family in a way that cannot be undone." My father didn't say anything. He just stood in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed and let her do it. So I left. There's a version of this story where I tell you I had a plan, where I say I knew, even then, that I was going to be okay. But that's not true. I sat on a bench at the transitway for 40 minutes that night because I genuinely did not know where to go. I called my best friend, Tamsin, and she didn't hesitate for a single second. She said, "Get on the 95. I'll meet you at the stop." And she did. She was standing there in her parka with 2 cups of Tim Hortons, and when she handed me one, I started crying and I couldn't stop. I stayed on Tamsin's couch for 6 weeks. The pregnancy ended on its own at 9 weeks. A miscarriage, quiet and devastating in the way that only loss you grieve alone can be. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone except Tamsin. I just got through it, the way you get through things when there's no one to carry part of the weight for you. One day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time, until one day you realize you've been standing on your own for so long that you've forgotten what it felt like to lean. I found a room in a shared house in Vanier. 4 people, 1 bathroom. A landlord who collected rent in cash and fixed nothing. I worked double shifts at a restaurant on Rideau Street. I waited tables during dinner service and took the breakfast shift on weekends. I smelled like grease and coffee most of the time. My feet hurt constantly. I was exhausted in a way I hadn't known was possible before, the kind that sits behind your eyes and doesn't move. But I showed up. Every single day, I showed up. I enrolled in night courses at Algonquin the following fall, administration and accounting, because I was good with numbers and because the program was affordable and because I could see very clearly that the only way out of the situation I was in was to build something, slowly, carefully, with my own hands. I will not pretend it was easy or fast. It wasn't. There were nights I ate crackers and peanut butter for dinner because I'd miscalculated my budget. There was a winter where the furnace in our house broke and the landlord took 3 weeks to fix it, and we all slept in the living room with every blanket we owned piled on top of us. There were moments, more than I'd like to admit, where I sat in the bathroom at work and cried into a paper towel, and then washed my face and went back out and smiled at tables. But something was happening underneath all of it. I was learning, not just from the courses, but from watching how money moves, how businesses bleed without realizing it, where the waste is, where the opportunity hides. The restaurant I worked at was family-owned, and the owner, a woman named Mrs. Okafor, let me help her with her bookkeeping when she found out I was studying accounting. She paid me an extra $200 a month and let me see the real numbers. I stayed late after closing 3 nights a week, sitting at the little desk in the back office, and I learned more there than I did in any classroom. By the time I was 26, I had my diploma, a better job at an accounting firm in Centretown, and enough saved to move into a 1-bedroom apartment on my own for the first time in my adult life. The day I got the keys, I stood in the empty living room for a long time. Just stood there. The walls were white and bare, and the floors needed cleaning, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. I kept going. I got my CPA designation at 29. I moved to a mid-sized firm that specialized in working with small businesses. I was good at it. Genuinely good. Not just competent, because I understood the fear that sits underneath every conversation about money. The way people avoid looking at the numbers because the numbers tell the truth about whether the thing they love is going to survive. I could look at the numbers without flinching. I could tell people what they needed to hear and help them figure out what came next. I also met someone. His name was Patrick, and he was kind and funny, and he thought my intensity about spreadsheets was charming rather than alarming. We got married when I was 31, at a small ceremony in Gatineau Park. Tamsin was my maid of honor. My parents were not there. I had not spoken to them in 9 years by then, and I did not send an invitation, and I did not feel guilty about that. What I felt, if I'm honest, was a small and quiet grief that had nothing to do with them specifically. It was grief for the version of that day that doesn't exist, the one where a father dances with his daughter and a mother fixes her veil in a mirror somewhere. I let myself feel it for a moment, standing behind the trees waiting for the music to start, and then I let it go. I had Patrick. I had Tamsin. I had the life I had built. It was enough. It was more than enough. The business came 3 years later. A small boutique accounting practice, just me and 2 associates to start. We focused on creative and trades industries, contractors, photographers, small manufacturers, the people who are brilliant at what they do and completely overwhelmed by the administrative side. We grew steadily. By the time I was 37, we had 11 staff and a client list I was genuinely proud of. I tell you all of this not to list accomplishments. I tell you because I need you to understand who I was, who I had become. By the time my parents knocked on my door, it was a Tuesday evening in October. Patrick was at a work dinner. I was home, making pasta, listening to a podcast about urban planning, because that's the kind of person I am now, and the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked at the camera on my phone. We have a video doorbell. It's useful. I recommend it. And I stood very still for a moment in my kitchen with the pasta water boiling behind me. My parents looked old. That was the first thing I noticed. My father's hair was fully white. My mother had shrunk somehow, or maybe I'd just remembered her as larger than she was. They were standing side by side on my front steps with the look of people who have rehearsed what they're about to say many times and are now terrified of delivering it. I turned off the stove. I set down my wooden spoon, and I opened the door. Neither of them spoke for a moment. My mother's eyes went immediately past me, scanning the hallway behind me, the way you look when you're searching for something specific. Vivienne, my father said. My name and his voice after 18 years felt strange, like a word in a language I used to speak. I know it's been a long time, my mother started. It has, I said. I didn't move from the doorway. I didn't invite them in. My mother glanced at my father and then back at me. We need to talk to you about your child. I looked at her. I kept my face very still. We've been thinking, she continued, and her voice had taken on the careful tone of someone navigating something fragile, that it's time. Time for us to be part of the family, to know our grandchild. Whatever happened between us, we're willing to put that aside. There was a long pause. Your grandchild, I said. Yes. She straightened slightly, like the word had given her confidence. We'd like to be involved. It's not too late for that. Every child deserves to know their grandparents. I looked at my father. He was studying the welcome mat. What child? I said. My mother blinked. Vivienne. I miscarried, I said. 18 years ago. Before I even knew what I was going to do. I lost the pregnancy at 9 weeks, alone on a Tuesday morning in a bathroom in Vanier. There is no child. The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. The kind that comes when the story someone has been telling themselves for a very long time meets reality and cannot survive the collision. My mother's hand came up to her mouth. I didn't know, she said very quietly. No, I agreed. You didn't, because you threw me out in February and never once called to check whether I was alive. My father finally looked up. His eyes were wet. I noticed this the way you notice weather. It registered and it didn't move me. Vivienne, we made a terrible mistake, he said. We know that. We have known that for a long time. I'm sure you have, I said. We'd like the chance to what? I asked. Not unkindly, genuinely. What is it you think happens now? Neither of them answered. I thought about the bench at the transitway, the 2 cups of Tim Hortons in the cold, the paper towels in the restaurant bathroom, the empty apartment and the bare white walls, the 9 years of building, the diploma, the designation, the practice, the marriage, the life, all of it done without them, despite them, in some ways because of them, because there is nothing quite as motivating as being left with nothing and deciding it isn't going to be the end of your story. I don't hate you, I said, and I meant it. I stopped being angry a long time ago, but I want you to understand something. The person you came here looking for, the daughter who might need you, the grandchild who could bring you back into a family, that's not what's here. What's here is a life I built entirely without you, and it's a good life. I'm happy. I'm not missing anything. My mother was crying now. My father had his jaw set in the way men do when they're trying very hard not to. I'm not going to ask you to leave and never come back, I said. You can call me if you want, but I need you to understand that I'm not going to pretend the last 18 years didn't happen, and I'm not going to make space in my life for people who showed me very clearly what I was worth to them when I needed them most. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be built from honest ground. I don't know if either of us is ready for that. I'm not sure I am. I paused. But I do know I'm not the 22-year-old girl who walked out of your house in February anymore. And you should probably know that before you decide what you want. My father nodded once, very slowly. My mother wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her coat. Okay, she said finally. It was a small word. It was the right one. I watched them walk back down my front steps and get into their car. I stood in the doorway until the taillights disappeared at the end of the street. Then I went back inside, turned the stove back on, and finished making my pasta. I sat down at my kitchen table and I thought about Tamsin standing at a bus stop in the February dark with 2 cups of coffee. I thought about Mrs. Okafor and the little desk in the back office. I thought about Patrick, who would be home in a couple of hours, who would pour himself a glass of wine and ask me how my evening was, and who I would actually tell, because that's what a life built on honest ground looks like. You tell the truth. You say, my parents came to the door tonight. You say, it was strange and sad and I feel okay. You say, I think I finally understand that letting go doesn't mean the wound wasn't real. It just means you chose not to live inside it. I didn't forgive them that night. I want to be honest about that. Forgiveness, the real kind, isn't a door you open once. It's something you practice slowly over time on your own terms. What I did that night was something smaller but maybe more important. I told the truth. I saw them clearly. I didn't pretend to be smaller than I am to make it easier for them. And then I ate my pasta. There's a version of this story that ends with a dramatic reconciliation, a tearful holiday dinner, a grandmother holding a grandchild who doesn't exist. That's not my story. My story ends with a woman at her own kitchen table, in the house she paid for, eating the dinner she made, waiting for the husband she chose. Family isn't the people who share your last name. It isn't us that closes its door in February and expects you to come back grateful. Family is the person who meets you at the bus stop. It's the woman who hands you a key to a desk in the back office and says, "Let me show you how this works." It's the man who finds your accounting spreadsheets charming and means it. I built that family from the ground up, in the cold, with nothing but my own 2 hands. And I would do it again. Every single day, I would do it again.